My husband and his buddies staged a prank for my birthday, blindfolded me, dumped me at an abandoned gas station, and drove off laughing. I never went home. When they filed the missing person report, I was already sailing to Europe. 3 years later, they saw me again on a billionaire's yacht. As his wife. I found the email 3 days before my 35th birthday. My fingers froze on the keyboard as I stared at our shared home office computer screen, a cold wave washing over me. Emmett had forgotten to log out of his account, something he never did. The message from Phoebe glowed on the monitor with sickening clarity. Can't wait for this weekend. Once she's out of the picture, we can finally stop sneaking around. The email thread stretched back 3 years. 3 whole years of lies, while I cooked his meals, washed his clothes, and smiled at company parties. Evidence upon evidence cascaded before my eyes as I scrolled through intimate messages, hotel confirmations, and photographs I could never unsee. My hands trembled as I forwarded everything to my personal email account. The one Emmett knew nothing about. Before we continue this journey of betrayal, resilience, and reinvention, I want to invite you to join our community of survivors and thrivers. If you're drawn to stories of women who refuse to be defined by others' cruelty, consider subscribing. It costs nothing and connects you with thousands who understand that sometimes the best revenge is living well. Now let's return to the moment of discovery. I heard his key in the front door and quickly closed the browser, my heart hammering in my chest. When he walked in, I greeted him with the same kiss I had given him for 12 years of marriage. He never suspected that something had fundamentally changed. Working late again tomorrow, he said casually over dinner, not meeting my eyes. Big project deadline. I nodded, watching him twirl pasta around his fork. Of course, honey. I understand. The lie slipped from his lips as easily as air. I wondered how many big project deadlines had been nights in Phoebe's bed. That night, I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. When had I become so invisible? What had I done to deserve this betrayal? The questions dissolved into a singular clarity. I deserved better. The next day brought an answer I hadn't expected. I left work early, sick to my stomach from stress and sleeplessness. Our house sat at the end of a quiet suburban cul-de-sac, the kind with manicured lawns and 2-car garages. I pulled into the neighbor's empty driveway instead of ours when I saw Emmett's car parked out front, hours before he should have been home. I approached from the side entrance and heard voices from the back patio. Emmett's laugh rang out, followed by others. Crouching beneath the dining room window, I peered over the sill. 4 people lounged around our patio table, drinking the expensive bourbon I had given Emmett for Christmas. Emmett, Phoebe, and his 2 oldest friends, Finn and Luca. Luca's wife Esla wasn't there, probably at home, just as clueless as I had been. So it's settled then? Finn was saying, his voice slightly slurred. The birthday surprise. You sure this isn't too harsh? Luca asked, though his tone was undercut by a smirk. Emmett shook his head. It's perfect. We blindfold her, drive around for an hour, and drop her off at that abandoned gas station on Route 16. By the time she finds her way back, she'll get the message. The message that you're done playing house with your boring wife, Phoebe added, sliding her hand onto Emmett's thigh. My stomach clenched as he leaned over and kissed her, right there, in our backyard, on the patio furniture I had picked out. She's been so clingy lately, Emmett sighed. Always asking questions, wanting to know where I've been. This will shake her up enough that when I tell her I want a divorce, she won't fight it. Phoebe beamed. And then we can finally stop hiding. Goodbye, problem wife. Finn raised his glass, and they all clinked theirs in agreement, laughing. I sank beneath the window, my back against the siding, heart pounding in my ears. They weren't just planning to humiliate me. They were plotting to break me. That night, when Emmett came to bed smelling of bourbon and betrayal, I had already made my decision. Morning light filtered through the curtains as I stared at my open suitcase hidden in the back of the closet. For 2 days, I had quietly gathered essentials, documents, photographs, my grandmother's jewelry. I had been withdrawing our emergency cash from the joint account in small amounts, $5,000 total. It would have to do. My hands shook slightly as I zipped up the suitcase and pushed it back into its hiding place. In the kitchen, Emmett was making coffee, whistling tunelessly. Morning, sunshine, he said. Excited about your birthday tomorrow? Very, I said, forcing a smile. Any hints about what you've planned? That would ruin the surprise, wouldn't it? I nodded, accepting the coffee mug he handed me. I suppose it would. Throughout the day, I moved like a ghost, saying silent goodbyes to everything I wouldn't take with me. The porcelain vase from our honeymoon. The blanket my mother had knitted. I made Emmett's favorite dinner that night. Pot roast, roasted potatoes, and carrots. He praised the meal, clueless to the storm brewing inside me. After dinner, I asked casually, will Finn and Luca be joining us for tomorrow's surprise? He shrugged. Why? Just curious. Been a while since we all hung out. Later, with the shower running, I called for an Uber to meet me at the gas station on Route 16 around noon. The driver hesitated at the location, but agreed after I offered extra payment. That night, I lay awake beside Emmett, memorizing the ceiling patterns, listening to his even breathing. The man I had loved, built a life with, was planning to discard me like trash. Silent tears soaked my pillow. Dawn broke on my 35th birthday. I got up and made pancakes with strawberries and whipped cream, his favorite. Emmett came downstairs, smiling. Happy birthday, babe, he said, kissing my cheek. I've got something special planned. I can't wait, I replied, voice steady. At 11, the doorbell rang. Finn and Luca stood grinning on the porch. No Phoebe, too obvious. Happy birthday, Isla, Finn said, handing me a silk scarf. I recognized the irony instantly. This would be my blindfold. It's beautiful, I said, running it between my fingers. Why don't you put it on? Luca asked. Emmett wants you to wear it for the surprise. I smiled and handed the scarf to Emmett, turning my back. Would you do the honors, honey? The soft fabric covered my eyes. Emmett tied it securely. His hands lingered. Ready for the best birthday surprise of your life? He whispered. Absolutely ready, I said, smiling for real for the first time in days. Almost there, Emmett announced as the car slowed. The blindfold stayed on, but I had counted the minutes, 47 since we left home. Long enough to disorient me. The door opened. Emmett helped me out. Gravel crunched underfoot. The smell of gasoline and dust hit my nose. We were there. Ready for your surprise? Finn asked, barely containing his laughter. I can't wait, I said, steady. Rough hands spun me around, probably Luca's. I stumbled on purpose. Then, with theatrical flair, Emmett removed the blindfold. The abandoned gas station looked even more desolate than I'd imagined. Shattered windows gaped like missing teeth in the weathered building. Faded signs advertised cigarette brands that hadn't existed for years. We were at least 5 miles from the nearest occupied building. Surprise! The 3 men shouted, doubling over with laughter. I forced confusion onto my face. I don't understand what's happening. It's a test, Emmett said, his eyes cold despite his smile. To see if you're as resourceful as you always claim to be. Finn held up my cell phone, which they'd taken from my purse before leaving the house. No cheating. You guys can't be serious, I said, letting my voice tremble. You're just going to leave me here? Don't worry, Luca chimed in. Someone drives by, eventually. The 3 of them backed toward the car, still laughing. I counted on what came next, their absolute confidence in my helplessness. Emmett, please, I called out, the perfect picture of desperation. Don't do this. It's my birthday. His hesitation was brief but noticeable, a flicker of something almost like guilt before Finn clapped him on the shoulder. The moment passed. Find your way home, Isla, Emmett called. We'll see you, whenever. The car door slammed. The engine roared to life. Dust billowed around me as they pulled away, their laughter fading into the distance. I waited until their car disappeared over the horizon before allowing my face to relax. Then I checked my watch, 11:47 a.m. My Uber would arrive in 13 minutes. I walked to the back of the abandoned building where I'd be hidden from the road. There, I removed my right boot and pulled out the emergency cash roll I'd stashed, $800 to help fund my escape. I changed quickly out of my birthday outfit into jeans, a plain t-shirt, and a baseball cap I had hidden in my large purse. That morning, at precisely noon, a blue sedan pulled into the gas station. The driver looked around nervously before spotting me emerging from behind the building. Mrs. Reynolds? He called, using the fake name I'd given. That's me, I replied with a wave. Thanks for coming all the way out here. No problem, he said, though his furrowed brow suggested otherwise. Where to now? Marston Pawn, downtown. He nodded, and we pulled away from the gas station, away from the life I was leaving behind. Mr. Marston was in his 70s, with arthritic hands and kind eyes that had seen every form of desperation. His shop smelled of old wood and metal polish. What can I do for you today, miss? He asked as I approached the counter. I removed my grandmother's pearl necklace, my diamond engagement ring, my wedding band, and the emerald earrings Emmett had given me for our 10th anniversary. I placed them all on the glass counter. I need to know what these are worth, I said, my voice remarkably steady. Mr. Marston studied me over his half-moon glasses, seeing more than I wanted him to. Quietly, he began examining each piece. This is fine jewelry, he commented, holding the engagement ring to the light. Family heirlooms. Some of them, I admitted. He nodded, asking no further questions. After careful examination, he named a figure that was fair, more than fair, actually. I can offer you $7,000 for the lot, he said. Though I suspect they mean more to you than money. I swallowed hard. Not anymore. Something in my expression must have spoken volumes. Mr. Marston disappeared into the back room and returned with something unexpected, a small handgun. I don't normally do this, he said quietly, but a woman traveling alone should have protection. He pushed it gently across the counter. It's registered and legal. Consider it a discount on the jewelry. I stared at the weapon, then back at him. How did you know I was leaving? 30 years in this business, he replied with a sad smile. I know the look of someone who needs a fresh start. I accepted both the cash and the gun, tucking the latter deep into my purse. Thank you. He nodded once. Good luck, wherever you're going. The bus station hummed with afternoon activity as I purchased a ticket to New York City. The overnight bus would get me there by morning, enough time to make my international flight. I sat in the back corner of the waiting area, baseball cap pulled low, watching the entrance. Part of me still feared Emmett would figure out my plan, would come storming in to drag me home. But as the hours passed and boarding time approached, I began to believe I might actually escape. The bus rolled out of the station at dusk. As the familiar storefronts and street signs of my hometown slipped away into darkness, I felt something unexpected, relief washing over me in powerful waves. No more pretending. No more silent tears. No more wondering when the next lie would come. In New York, I used an internet cafe to check in for my flight and print my boarding pass. I'd booked it using my maiden name, Isabella Chen, and paid in cash through a travel agency that catered to clients who preferred anonymity. The flight to Paris wasn't direct. It included a layover in Iceland, making me harder to track. Security at JFK barely glanced at my passport. Mr. Marston's gift had been safely mailed ahead to a French post office box I'd arranged online. Within hours, I was airborne, watching America disappear beneath clouds and distance. The Parisian hostel was in Montmartre, shabby but clean, with a shared bathroom and a narrow bed that squeaked with every movement. I sat on its edge that first night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the city drifting through the window. French conversations echoed from the street below. Someone was playing an accordion in the distance. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery downstairs clung to everything. I'd done it. I'd actually escaped. My hands trembled as I opened the burner phone I'd bought at the airport. No calls. No texts. Emmett was probably just returning home, expecting to find me humiliated, defeated, and ready to accept whatever crumbs of a life he was willing to offer. But I was here, an ocean away, free. Terror gripped me suddenly. What had I done? I had no job, no real plan, limited funds, and barely spoke the language. I was completely alone in a foreign country. But then again, hadn't I been alone for years? Married, but isolated. Present, but unseen. I walked to the window and pushed it open, letting the cool Parisian night air brush my face. The Sacré-Cœur Basilica glowed white against the dark sky, a beacon on the hill. Somewhere in the distance, someone laughed, a genuine, joyful sound. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a future shaped by my own hands. The thought was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was mine. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains of my hostel room, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I had been in Paris for 2 weeks, and my resources were dwindling faster than I'd hoped. The romantic notion of escape had collided with the reality of being a foreigner with limited language skills and no employment history. That morning, I walked into the third employment agency I'd visited that week. My resume was sparse, deliberately so. I couldn't risk Emmett ever finding me. Isabella Chen, the receptionist called, mangling my maiden name with a French accent. The interviewer, Madame Rousseau, was a stern woman with impeccable posture and silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun. She glanced at my paperwork with pursed lips. "Your French is minimal," she noted in heavily accented English. "I'm learning," I replied quickly. She raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "And your experience?" "Administrative work," I answered vaguely. "I'm organized, punctual, and I learn fast." She studied me for a long moment, then sighed. "We have one position, receptionist at Lambert Financial. They need someone who speaks English for their international clients." My heart leapt. "Financial?" I asked, hopeful. "Don't get excited. You answer phones and greet clients. 3-month temporary contract. If they like you, perhaps it becomes permanent." I nodded eagerly. "When can I start?" Lambert Financial occupied the 3rd floor of a modest building in the 8th arrondissement. The office was smaller than I expected, just 15 employees. My desk sat near the entrance, a polished wooden fortress separating me from the visitors. "Bonjour, Lambert Financial." I practiced each morning before the office opened, trying to perfect my accent. "Comment puis-je vous aider?" My immediate supervisor, Giselle, was initially cold toward me, another American taking a job a French person could have filled. But she softened slightly when she saw my determination. "Your pronunciation," she said one afternoon, wincing as I mangled the client's name over the phone, "needs work." After I hung up, she added, "Let me help you." At lunch, while others went to nearby cafes, Giselle began teaching me proper French, correcting my grammar and pronunciation between bites of her sandwich. In return, I stayed late to help her with English reports. By night, I attended free language exchange meetups at a local bookstore. There, surrounded by expatriates and locals, I practiced conversation and gradually built a small social circle, careful never to reveal too much about my past. My tiny studio apartment, rented with the last of my pawn shop money, became my sanctuary. Each night, I wrote down new French words I'd learned, repeating them until they felt natural on my tongue. The language became my armor, each new phrase a brick in the wall between my past and my present. 3 months into my contract, I noticed something odd while sorting the mail. An invoice from a major client had been duplicated, and Lambert Financial had paid it twice, an error of nearly 40,000 euros. I hesitated, unsure if it was my place to say something. But the duplicated invoice number nagged at me. "Excuse me," I said, knocking softly on the door of Philippe Lambert's office, the company's founder and CEO. "I noticed something in the accounts that might be important." He looked up, surprised to see the receptionist in his doorway. When I explained the double payment, his expression shifted from annoyance to interest. The next day, Lambert Financial recovered the duplicate payment, and I received something unexpected, a promotion to administrative assistant. "You have good eyes," Philippe told me. "We need that." My new role gave me access to financial reports, client portfolios, and investment strategies. The language of finance came back to me easily. Numbers had always made sense to me in a way people sometimes didn't. While filing reports and organizing data, I absorbed everything I could about European markets. 6 months into my new life, I had established a routine, work during the day, French lessons or quiet study in the evenings. On weekends, I explored Paris alone, finding comfort in anonymity. Occasionally, I woke from nightmares where Emmett found me, dragging me back to a life of humiliation. I'd bolt upright, heart racing, before remembering the ocean between us. One rainy Tuesday, I prepared the conference room for a client meeting. As I arranged water glasses and notepads, Philippe entered with Giselle and 2 senior advisors. "Isabella, could you bring the Mercer portfolio when you have a moment?" Philippe asked. I nodded and retrieved the file. As I placed it on the table, I noticed something in the investment strategy that triggered an alarm in my mind. "Will that be all?" I asked, turning to leave. "Yes, thank you," Philippe replied. I hesitated at the door, my hand on the knob. The error was glaring to me. They were recommending a significant investment in a sector that, based on the reports I'd been filing for weeks, showed clear signs of instability. "Pardon," I said, turning back. But I couldn't help noticing the telecom investment strategy. "There's a report from last week showing 3 major European telecom companies facing regulatory challenges. The timing might be problematic." The room fell silent. Administrative assistants didn't comment on investment strategy. "The report is in the blue folder, 3rd cabinet, 2nd drawer," I added, then promptly shut my mouth. After an excruciating pause, Philippe opened his briefcase and produced the very report I'd mentioned. He studied it, then looked up at me with narrowed eyes. "You read all the reports that come across your desk?" "Yes, sir," I admitted. "I find them educational." A client meeting wasn't the place for that conversation, so I was dismissed with a nod. I spent the rest of the day certain I'd be fired. Instead, Philippe called me into his office after hours. "How much do you know about financial markets?" he asked, without preamble. "More than a receptionist should," I admitted. "Less than I'd like." "Where did you learn?" "Self-taught," I replied, only half a lie. It was easier than explaining my previous life. I've always been good with patterns and numbers. Philippe leaned back in his chair. "The Mercer account is important to us. Your observation today saved us from a potentially embarrassing recommendation." He paused. "Would you be interested in more responsibility here?" "What kind of responsibility?" "Analysis, research. Behind the scenes, of course. Your French isn't quite ready for client-facing roles." For the first time in months, I felt something new, a flicker of genuine ambition. Not just survival, but purpose. "I'd like that very much," I replied. That night, as I walked home along the Seine, the lights of Paris reflected in the water like stars. For the first time since I arrived, I didn't feel like I was merely hiding. Isabella Chen, the woman I was becoming, had just taken her first real step forward. I wasn't running from the past anymore. I was walking steadily towards something new. I stopped on Pont des Arts, watching boats glide beneath me. Somewhere across the ocean, Emmett probably believed I was broken, defeated, perhaps even dead. He couldn't imagine what I was building here, brick by careful brick. A life completely beyond his reach. 6 months into my new role as a financial analyst at Lambert Financial, Philippe called me into his office. A man I didn't recognize sat across from his desk. Tall, with salt and pepper hair, he wore a perfectly tailored navy suit that spoke of wealth without shouting it. "Isabella, this is Mr. Tanner Reed," Philippe said, using the name I now answered to without hesitation. "He's the CEO of Atlantic Meridian Shipping. Mr. Reed, this is Isabella Chen, the analyst I mentioned." Tanner Reed stood to shake my hand. His grip was firm, his blue eyes assessing me with open curiosity. "Mr. Lambert tells me you have an unusual talent for spotting market trends," he said, his American accent unmistakable. "Something about seeing patterns others miss." I smiled politely. "I just pay attention to details." "Isabella will organize your portfolio review," Philippe explained. "Atlantic Meridian is expanding its European operations, and they need our expertise on local investment opportunities." I nodded, accepting the assignment with professional detachment. It was the largest account I'd ever been given, a sign of Philippe's growing trust. As I turned to leave, Tanner Reed spoke again. "Mr. Lambert mentioned you're American as well." I tensed slightly. "Originally, yes. But Paris is home now." Something in my tone must have discouraged further questions. He simply nodded and returned to his conversation with Philippe. Atlantic Meridian's portfolio was massive, a sprawling network of shipping operations, property investments, and stock holdings. I spent weeks organizing the data and creating comprehensive analyses of their current positions and potential vulnerabilities. Tanner Reed returned to our offices frequently during this period. Sometimes, he worked directly with me, asking pointed questions about European markets that revealed a sharp business mind beneath his reserved exterior. "You flagged our Mediterranean port investments as high risk," he noted during one session, tapping the report I'd prepared. "Most analysts consider that region stable." "Most analysts aren't looking at the labor unrest in key ports," I replied. 3 major strikes in 8 months, with another likely before year's end. Combined with new fuel regulations taking effect next quarter, your operational costs there will jump at least 17%. He studied me with newfound interest. And your recommendation? Strengthen your Northern European holdings instead. Less immediate profit potential, but significantly more stable over the next 3 years, particularly the Norwegian routes. 2 weeks later, the Mediterranean ports erupted in the largest shipping strike in 15 years. Atlantic Meridian, having shifted resources based partly on my analysis, weathered the crisis while competitors floundered. The following day, Tanner Reed arrived at our office with an unusual request. "I'd like to borrow Miss Chen for a special project," he told Philippe. "A consulting arrangement between our companies, with her as the primary liaison." Philippe looked conflicted, pleased at the prestigious connection, but reluctant to lose my services. "It would be a substantial contract," Tanner added, naming a figure that made Philip's eyebrows rise. And so began my work with Atlantic Meridian. At first, just 1 day a week, eventually, it became my primary focus. Tanner's Paris apartment served as our workspace, a stunning pied-à-terre with views of the Eiffel Tower. We worked long hours analyzing market data, restructuring investments, and planning strategic acquisitions. "The shipping industry faces a critical juncture," Tanner explained one evening as we studied projections, environmental regulations, automation, shifting trade agreements. "Most of my competitors are reacting instead of preparing." I respected his foresight. Unlike many executives I'd met, he didn't chase quarterly profits at the expense of long-term stability. Our professional relationship developed a rhythm. I provided analysis. He made decisions. We rarely spoke of personal matters, an arrangement that suited us both. Until the market crash of 2023. It began with a collapse of a major Asian bank, triggering a domino effect across global markets. Companies panicked, selling assets at devastating losses. "Everyone's liquidating," Tanner said during an emergency call, his voice tight with stress. "The board wants to follow suit." "Don't," I replied immediately. "This is exactly when you should be acquiring, not selling. We could lose everything or emerge twice as strong." I sent him a contingency analysis I'd quietly prepared months earlier. "These shipping companies will be available for a fraction of their value. Their routes complement yours perfectly." Silence stretched between us. I'd overstepped, an analyst telling a CEO how to run his billion-dollar company during a global crisis. "If you're wrong," he finally said, "we both lose our careers." "I'm not wrong." 3 days later, while competitors scrambled to offload assets, Atlantic Meridian began a careful acquisition strategy. Within 6 months, the company had doubled its fleet at minimal cost. When markets stabilized, Atlantic Meridian's value had tripled. Financial journals called it strategic genius. Only Tanner and I knew the truth, that a woman once left blindfolded at a gas station had orchestrated one of the most successful corporate expansions in recent history. After the crash, something shifted. Tanner began asking for my opinion on matters beyond finance. We occasionally dined together after late work sessions. Our conversations drifted, books, travel, cautious glimpses of our pasts. I revealed little. Only that I had left America after a painful divorce. He shared more, a failed marriage, a daughter in college who rarely called. One evening, after a particularly successful acquisition, he opened a bottle of champagne. "To unlikely partnerships," he toasted. "To new beginnings," I countered. Our glasses clinked. His eyes lingered on mine. "Isabella," he said quietly, "I've come to value more than just your financial insights." I set down my glass. "Tanner, I work for you. Technically, you work for Lambert Financial. The distinction doesn't eliminate the complication." He respected my hesitation. The subject wasn't raised again for months, though something had undeniably changed. Until Tokyo. Atlantic Meridian hosted a global summit for shipping executives. As Tanner's key advisor, I accompanied him, preparing presentations, analyzing competitor strategy. On the final evening, I watched him command a room of global leaders with quiet confidence, and I realized my feelings had evolved beyond professional admiration. Later, alone on the rooftop garden of our hotel, I found him staring out at the Tokyo skyline. "You should be celebrating," I said. "The consortium agreement is a triumph." "Some victories feel hollow without someone to share them with," he replied. The moment stretched, full of unspoken possibility. I've spent 3 years rebuilding myself, I said, learning to trust my judgment again. And what is your judgment telling you now? I met his gaze. That fear is a poor foundation for decisions. His hand found mine on the railing, warm and steady. I would never want to be another thing you fear, Isabella. 6 months later, we stood in a modest Paris courthouse. No lavish ceremony. No grand reception. Just us, Philippe and his wife as witnesses, and the simple words that bound us together. My wedding ring was nothing like the one Emmett had given me. Tanner had chosen a band of twisted gold, imperfect, unique, resilient. The European financial press noted the marriage with curiosity, a shipping magnate marrying his financial advisor. The American media barely noticed. That evening, on our Paris balcony, Tanner wrapped his arms around me. Any regrets, Mrs. Reed? I leaned back into him, watching the lights shimmer. None. And you? Only that I didn't find you sooner. I smiled. We found each other exactly when we were meant to. 3 years into our marriage, Tanner and I split our time between Paris and New York. I consulted almost exclusively on his ventures, though I maintained my connection to Lambert Financial. We were reviewing acquisition targets in his home office overlooking Central Park when an email notification pinged. He scanned it and looked up with a curious expression. A mid-sized American construction firm seeking international investment. Reynolds Construction. My heart stopped. Emmett's family business. Are you okay? Tanner asked, noticing my stillness. I nodded slowly. Reynolds was my married name. Emmett Reynolds was my ex-husband. Tanner's eyebrows rose. The husband from the story? I nodded again. I haven't seen or spoken to him since the day I left. What does the email say? He turned the screen toward me. The company was overextended, desperate for capital, claiming vague overseas contracts. There probably aren't any real contracts, I said flatly. Emmett always talked big. Rarely delivered. I'll decline the meeting. I hesitated. Part of me wanted that, to let it die quietly. But another part, the woman I'd become, wanted closure. No, I said. Take the meeting. I want to be there. The day of the meeting, I dressed carefully, a tailored charcoal suit, pearl earrings from Tanner, hair in a sophisticated updo. I looked nothing like the woman Emmett left behind. Second thoughts? Tanner asked. No, just preparing. Remember, you hold all the power now. I know. At Atlantic Meridian's New York office, I sat with my back to the door as Emmett entered. I didn't look up until they were seated across from us, delivering their pitch. Only then did I lift my gaze. It took Emmett a moment. Then recognition dawned. Isla? He gasped. Isabella Reed, I corrected, calm and clear. Chief Strategic Advisor. Marcus Klein blinked. You two know each other? Emmett stammered. We have a prior acquaintance. How fascinating, Tanner said smoothly. Small world. We reviewed their proposal. I presented the weaknesses in their financials. You disappeared, Emmett blurted. We thought you were dead. How unfortunate for you, I replied evenly. That must have been distressing. 3 years. Not a word. And yet, here I am. When the meeting concluded, Tanner left us alone briefly. Emmett looked at me. Why? I considered all the clever retorts. But I told the truth. Because you left me blindfolded at an abandoned gas station. Because I overheard you and Phoebe planning to shake me up. Because I deserved better. It was. Don't. I cut him off. Don't try to minimize it. Don't pretend it was harmless. He swallowed hard. So that's it? That's it, I said. I'm not here for revenge. I just wanted to see you one last time. And feel nothing. You're just someone else's wife now? I'm my own person first. I stood. As for your funding, Atlantic Meridian will pass. Your proposal doesn't meet our standards. He didn't take my hand. He couldn't meet my eyes. As Tanner and I walked him to the elevator, I felt it, a release. Not vengeance. Not triumph. Freedom. Because this life wasn't a reaction to Emmett anymore. It was mine. Built brick by brick. Choice by choice. And that was the sweetest victory of all. As Isabella's journey comes to a close, I'd love to know, which moment resonated with you most? Was it her escape? Her rise? That final confrontation? Let us know in the comments, and if her story inspired you, subscribe for more tales of resilience and rebirth. Your support means everything.